What's going on, everybody? This is a really cool week, and I'll explain why here in just a minute. You know, these Q&A videos, and I call them Q&A videos, but sometimes I think that that's not really what they are. It's not Q&A, it's Q&O. I mean, it's questions and opinions. It's really just discussions. It's not questions with answers. It's questions with, what does Greg think? And, you know, I hope that everybody realizes that when I'm giving my opinion, it is certainly not the right one versus somebody else's opinion being the wrong one. You know, when I started this Q&A thing, and again, we'll call it Q&A just for the sake of calling it Q&A, it was to create dialogue. It was because people would give great comments in different videos and I would respond, but there's a limitation to when you're writing, and there's a limitation to the back and forth when you're writing because it's hard to articulate yourself at times. At least it's harder for me to articulate myself via written text than it is with words. I mean, you guys know me by now. I can go on and on and on, and it's much easier and faster for me to do that via video format. So please keep that in mind that, again, these are just opinions. I am certainly not the most knowledgeable guy in the room, and I am certainly not the person who has the answers to all questions, but I definitely have opinions to all questions and all topics. Now, this week, I had 5 questions. The only 5 questions that were asked are the 5 questions that you'll see here today. And I was getting a little nervous because it was kind of getting toward the point where I picked the questions and I only had like 3 or 4. So if you have a question that you want for an upcoming episode, please, in the comments down below, just simply type out your question. Don't hesitate to do that. Don't think, oh, I don't know if this is a good question, or I don't know if Greg will be able to answer this question. Just type out your question. It is super enjoyable. And I was just talking to a friend about this today. It was super enjoyable for me to, every week, when I go in, usually on Monday or Tuesday, I go in and I look through all of the responses from the previous week's episode to come up with which questions will be used and reading over the topics. That it's really, really fun and interesting to me to hear the topics that people want to hear about. And so please don't hesitate to ask a question. Now, why is this a big week? Why is this a fun week? Well, you know how I've got those 3 Grail cards that I've talked about wanting since I was about 10? And it may be more like 9. I was 9 or 10 when I started wanting these 3 cards. And a lot of you already know what they are. One of them is the 1954 Topps Ernie Banks rookie card. One of them is the 1957 Topps Brooks Robinson rookie card. And one of them is the 1948 Bowman Yogi Berra rookie card. I've wanted those 3 cards for a long time. Well, guess what? I got one of them. I got one of the 3. I got one. Now, it's kind of an interesting story how this played out. I didn't buy it. I traded for it. And how the story unfolds is, I think, entertaining. It's interesting. So my plan is today, I'm going to try to put together a video to share the events that took place in the process of this Grail pickup for me. And again, you know, I know people throw the term Grail around a lot. And what does Grail mean? What's a gold card? To me, a Grail card is a card that you've wanted for a really, really long time, but for whatever reason, were not able to quite acquire. Whether it be because of a price thing, whether it because of an availability thing, the rarity of the card, whatever it is. It's a card that you've longed for to have in your collection for a long time. And to me, I think 35 years was long enough. And so one of the 3 is now officially in my collection. Look for that video. Again, will probably be either tomorrow, Thursday, or Friday. I'm really excited, and I absolutely love the card. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at our first question from this week's episode. If you could not afford or the price is out of your budget, would you ever consider getting an archived copy of that card? Or would you consider them to be fake? Even if grading makes note on the label that it is an archived card. I have a few for my PC and am very happy with them. Okay, now this is a question that I think a lot of you would probably look at and go, I know Greg's answer. This is an easy one. I don't know if a lot of you actually know my opinion on this one. I might surprise some of you. So when we're talking about reprint cards or archive cards or, reproductions of cards, what you are getting when you get a reprint card of some, big, historic, old card, whatever it may be, what you're getting is you're getting a very close replica that looks like the card, that has the image of the card, that's probably the same size as the card of the original. And I could see why somebody would have an appeal to obtain a card if there's a particular image that they really like. Again, I've mentioned before, I love photography. And when you pick up a card, you're picking up that image. So I do understand it. But that's only part of the reason why I collect. When there are cards that I want, for example, the Ernie Banks, the Brooks Robinson, the Yogi Berra cards that I mentioned a minute ago. The reason I want those cards are a few things. One is I love the image on all three. So a reprint, I would be able to check that box. The second thing is I love the player of all three of those cards. So a lot of the cards I really want, it's also at least partly because of the player itself on the card and being a fan of that card or a fan of that individual. That is certainly part of the process of me deciding cards that I want. But probably the most important part of cards that I collect, it's not just the image and it's not just the player. It's actually the history and the story of the card. Like when I see a card that is heavily worn, right? Heavy wear on the corners. And if we're talking about an older card, I don't know, whether it be, say it's a 34 Gaudy, a 34 Gaudy Lefty Grove that's heavily worn. That tells you something about at least one of the owners of the card. It tells you that card was handled a lot. And that card would be handled a lot because that card was loved a lot. And that card was loved a lot because they were a fan of either their collection or that player. When my dad had that shoebox find that I did a video on over a year ago, some of the most famous players in that particular collection that he purchased had the heaviest wear. The Willie McCovey had a ton of wear. There's a Willie McCovey rookie. The 60 Topps Yogi Berra had a ton of wear. The 60 Topps Hank Aaron had a ton of wear. But some of the other cards had very little wear. And that tells you that person handled those cards a lot, looked at those ones, took them out of the shoebox, showed friends, showed family members, passed them around, had them out at dinner parties or something. You can only imagine how the wear took place. But it was certainly because they were handled. To me, that's part of the charm of an old card. Now, I like having cards in nice condition. But when you see a card like a 34 Gaudy, Lefty Grove, that looks like mint, it's like an 8. Part of me is like, this card was forgotten The story of this card is it got put into a box and it was forgotten for years and years and years. And there's something cool about that because it's rare to have a card in high condition. There aren't many of them that lasted, the last 90 years that didn't have condition wear because most of them were looked at or played with or dropped or whatever it may be. So I kind of find a definite amount of charm in a card with wear versus if that 34 Lefty Grove looks pristine, it almost looks fake. It almost looks like it's not real, like it's been messed with. But the one that's got heavy wear, so for me, and again, this is just, this is not the answer. This is just Greg's point of view and what Greg likes. So what I like is on a pre-war card, I like a pre-war card to look like it's been loved. I mean, I think a 3 or a 4 is kind of the sweet spot. Now, if you want something rare, a rare pre-war card would be a 7 or an 8. But a card with love, a card with a story, which is part of what I'm collecting, is that card that has wear. Now, if we start getting into the late 40s and 50s and 60s, I'm more interested in a nice copy because there's less time that took place. And because there's less time that took place, it means that there were a lot less things that maybe could have happened to it. So I'm more into high-grade cards from the late 40s, 50s, and 60s than I am a pre-war card. So generically speaking, I understand the appeal to some people of like a reproduction card, especially of an older card. But to me, that is a missing ingredient from what I'm looking for from a pre-war card. So I want one that's nice, but I don't want one that's too nice. And a reprint looks too nice and is less desirable, at least for me. So to answer your question, which I took 7 minutes to do, yes, I understand the demand and why some people would want reprint cards. They're just not for me because they're missing part of what I'm trying to collect, which is the history and the story of the card itself. Here's a question for you, Greg. If you were to be a super collector of just one player, or one player from each sport, who would you pick and why? Thanks, Greg. Oh, I love this question. Andrew always asks great questions, and this is a great question. A super collector. So somebody that I would want their cards, but I would also want other stuff from them. It is a tough question to narrow it down, but I do think it's a fun question that I'm eager to give my thoughts on. Now, first, I'm going to share it on a few sports. Instead of just picking one player from one sport, I'm going to pick one player from a variety of sports. And I'm going to do that because I just think it's more fun to talk about, and you know me, why keep it short when I could make it longer? So the first thing is, part of it is well, it depends. Like, is my budget unlimited? Because sure, I'd love to collect Babe Ruth stuff. I'd love to be a Babe Ruth super collector, but that would get really, really expensive really, really fast, and is probably not realistic for someone like me. I think the history of Babe Ruth, the fame of Babe Ruth, the story of Babe Ruth is certainly an interesting one that I would very much be intrigued by. But I don't really think that that's the answer I'm going to give because, at least for baseball, because I don't think that one's just too, there's not enough reason behind it. It's Babe Ruth. Of course, it's Babe Ruth. So then it kind of narrows me. So then I go, well, what about Jackie Robinson? The story of Jackie Robinson, the struggles that he faced and the things that he overcame and the fame and the history of Jackie Robinson, that would be a great one. But then again, I think that it's kind of unreasonable because anything that's got Jackie Robinson on it is really, really expensive, deservedly so. Same with Babe Ruth. So I think I'm going to narrow it. So I named two that would be fun, but just don't seem realistic. So what's realistic that I would consider being a super collector for? Now, let me first say, I'm part of what I like about people that I collect is the character, the integrity, the history of the person, not just of the card. Not just how good the player was or how famous the player was, but what did that particular person do and what were they all about? So that's definitely an underlying kind of aspect to this for me. So I would want to collect someone that I look up to as a player, but I also look up to as a person. And I have a lot of respect for in both regards. And if I have a personal connection to each, that would certainly be a piece of the puzzle that would make it fit best as well. So I would say for baseball, I could narrow it down realistically to two guys. One is Ted Williams. You know, I've talked before about how in 6th grade, I read a Ted Williams biography. I started really following Ted Williams. I bought some of the Fleer Ted Williams cards, which I still have. I always wanted Ted Williams cards. I was able to meet Ted Williams at a Sacramento card show. I got as an early Christmas present from my dad. He paid $39 for my autograph ticket where I got signed my Ted Williams ball on the sweet spot, which I still have. He could not have been nicer, and I was just a little kid when I met him, and I respect him, not just because of how good he was. I mean, and here's the other thing about Ted Williams. This is crazy. He missed 3 consecutive seasons from his prime, for World War II and the Korean War. And if you look at the seasons right before and right after he was gone. He was leading the league in home runs. He was having an incredible batting average. He finished in the top 3 of the MVP voting. I believe it was like the 2 years before and the 2 years after he was gone. He finished in the top 3. And that's before and after the 3 years that he missed. I mean, he was averaging in the high 30 home run realm in those years before he left and after he left. They were prime years of his career. I think it's very safe to say he would have had at least another 100 home runs had he gotten to play through. But he didn't. Instead, he risked his life as a pilot defending our country, which I have a tremendous amount of respect for. So I love Ted Williams. He is very high on the list. Another guy that I really, really love is Yogi Berra. Yogi Berra was part of D-Day. We just celebrated the D-Day anniversary. He was part of D-Day. I mean, an incredible character, a coach. He has 13 rings, I think. A couple of those are as a player, as a coach. 10 or 11, one of the two is as a player. I mean, the guy was a winner, won MVPs. He was an incredible player and character. And I've talked about, I got to get his autograph at a card show. I met him at the show. I talked about how I met him, riding in the elevator with him. In about 20 years ago, and he would go out to, spring training for the Yankees in Tampa, and he would take full uniform. I mean, this is in like the early 2000s, and he would be out there in a full uniform just hanging out. Incredible. Loved everything about baseball, and great guy. So those would be the two. If I had to pick one, I would pick Ted Williams. But those two guys, I love both of them for a mountain of reasons. Now, if we're talking other sports, I'll go a little bit quicker through these. I love Gale Sayers. Gale Sayers is a human highlight reel. Unbelievable talent, unbelievable athlete. You know, I've shown on the channel, I've shown my complete Gale Sayers run of his base cards. But the story, you know, I fell in love with Gale Sayers in 5th or 6th grade as well. You know, when I'm at the peak of my loving sports and loving baseball and loving soccer and basketball and golf and all these things that I was doing, that's when I saw Brian's song and just was like, man, this guy is a really cool guy. You know, and I was lucky enough, I received from a viewer his handprint, his live ink handprint that's autographed. Amazing gift. I love Gale Sayers, so I would say Gale Sayers would be. I also received a card, like an oddball card of Gale Sayers from a different viewer of the channel. So I don't think that I'm a super collector of Gale Sayers, but I'm always looking to add Gale Sayers things. Absolutely love him. Now, I would say, so for basketball, growing up, my guy was Larry Bird. And I have, you know, the Larry Bird, Dr. J, Magic Johnson rookie card in a PSA 7. That was my Grail card. I still have the 81 Topps Larry Bird card from my collection, which I sent into PSA, I don't know, maybe 4 years ago. It got an 8. I don't know how it's only an 8. It looks like a 10 to me. I had every Larry Bird card at one point. I had as a kid, I had a Larry Bird jersey. Why did I like Larry Bird? Again, I've talked a little bit about this. The Celtics were good when I was a kid. And so, you know, the games of the week on the weekend morning games for basketball usually revolved around the Lakers and the Celtics. And you kind of had to pick one of them. And this is as Jordan was ascending. But this is in, you know, the twilight, the peak of the success of those guys. And so I just watched the Lakers and the Celtics, and you kind of had to pick one. And I love the fundamental basketball of the Celtics. You know, Robert Parrish, have several of his cards, have his autograph. You know, Kevin McHale, I have his rookie card. I just loved the way they played, and so I was drawn to them. And Larry Bird was the guy. So if I was going to super collect somebody for basketball, it would be Larry Bird. Now, quickly, there are other sports that I love. You know, I love soccer. I'm actually kind of a closet English soccer league fan. And so I could go down a bunch of different roads. You know, I could get into soccer, I could get into hockey, I can get into all those. The other one I would talk about that I collect a lot of is golf. I love golf cards. I had the whole 81 and 82 Donner sets. I've got, you know, some early cards of Harry Vardon. You know, I've got a Bobby Jones rookie. I've got a Gene Sarazen Sport King. I've got a lot of Walter Hagen rookie and Sport King. I've got a lot of golf cards. So the other one I would get into would be golf. And if I were to pick somebody to super collect in golf, I think it would be Tom Watson. My dad was a huge Tom Watson fan. And Tom Watson, again, is a guy of character. I mean, he was a character guy. He was very much into integrity of the sport, respect for the game, respect for other players. I like Jack Nicklaus, and I met Arnold Palmer a couple of times. I have Nicklaus's autograph. I've got Palmer. I got his autograph a couple of times in person. I have, I think, 3 Palmer autographs. So I do like golf a lot. But if I had to pick one, I think my dad's passion for Tom Watson and my respect of Tom Watson and his respect of the game and others would lead me to collecting Tom Watson if I were to collect a golfer. Question. Looking at making player runs of the more well-known vintage Hall of Famers, Aaron, Clemente, Mays, etc. My issue is I'm unsure of where to start their run. Should I go after the cards of theirs I like the most first, or be patient, save up, and go after their rookie card or bigger cards first? Thanks. Okay. I've heard a lot of people talk about this, and, like my buddy Ray from Philly, he talks about how he collects the last card first, and then he works his way back to the first card. And then he's also talked about in some of his runs, it's tough because now in that amount of time, as he's been working on some of his runs, the rookie cards have gone up enough that they're hard to afford. So I could see why someone would want to start with the most expensive and then work their way toward the end of the career. I get that. Whenever I get advice or a recommendation or suggestion, what I always try to do, because what I don't want to be that guy that says, you should do what I say, not what I do. I try to be a person who does things in a way that he believes in. And so then when somebody asks me, hey, what would you do about a home loan? I could say, well, I had a 15-year home loan. So I would recommend a 15-year home loan because of the amount of interest that you would save. And other people say, well, there's, look at me. Now I'm going down the whole home. You can make an argument for a 30-year loan and maximizing your retirement plan, or you could make the argument for a 15-year home loan. That aside, let's refocus on the question. Whenever anybody asks me for advice, I try to say, well, what did I do or what am I doing? So here's what I did. I have a few player runs that I've been working on. I've completed my Gale Sayers run. I'm working on an Otto Graham run. I'm working on a Julius Erving run. With all of those guys, I did not go sequentially. I did not go reverse chronologically. I think when you go, oh, I've got to get the rookie card first before I get the second card, what you're doing is you're putting limitations on yourself of, I can't get that one yet until I get this one first. And what happens is you have missed opportunities. You have a missed opportunity. If you have to get the last card in the run before the first card in the run, but a really nice rookie pops up for sale and it's a great price, and you see it at a show and you're like, nope, that has to be the last one, then you're passing up possible deals. You're passing up possible great cards that were maybe undergraded. So my recommendation is don't pick an order. Look at all the cards. I'm working on my Sammy Baugh run. I don't have his rookie card yet, but I have a lot of his other cards. I have his 1950. I have his 1952. Why do I have those ones? I have those ones because I saw two that I really liked, that I thought were in good condition, that I thought were undergraded, that I thought were a good, fair price. So I bought them. And when the other ones pop up for sale, I'd buy those too. I'm missing one card from my Otto Graham run. It's his second card. The reason I'm missing that card is I haven't seen one in the right condition and the right price range that meets the rest of my collection yet. So I think when you get too focused, I'm going to get this card next, and then I'm going to get this card next. That limits you from good deals, from good opportunities that might present themselves. So I would say don't pigeonhole yourself. Find, if you've got 2 or 3 players that you want to build runs of, limit yourself to those 2 or 3 players. And when you see a card that fits your eye, that fits your price range, that would fit in that player run collection that you're building, buy that one. And then when the next one pops up that fits, buy that one. But when you get too specific on what you're going to get next, and it has to be in this order, it presents too many missed opportunities or potential missed opportunities, and I would avoid that. question. Do you have any expensive snap decisions made at a card show that you now regret? When the pressure's on at a show with a card in my hand, I sometimes don't think as clearly as I normally would. And this is a great question. Well, first off, let me say I'm very conservative with my. I think that I'm very conservative with my money, and I'm very conservative with my purchases. I don't make a lot of split-second purchases and decisions. Now, if anything, when I'm at a show and I have a pocket full of money, I tend to lean towards not buying the card instead of buying it. If I'm going to make a mistake, I'm going to make a mistake where I didn't buy something I should have. It would be very uncharacteristic of me to buy something at a show and go, I wish I hadn't bought it. Because I have to be really sure of something. I mean, again, I'm a guy who's been looking for the right Ernie Banks rookie card for 35 years. I'm not rushing into the decision, right? Now, part of that is the cost of it. It's cost prohibitive for me to afford it. But you get my point that I am willing to be patient if I need to be patient. So my advice at a card show is if you know that you're not thinking always super clearly, then I would say know that about yourself and be very conservative about your purchases. Don't buy something unless you're sure that it's the card. If you're not positive that that's the card, don't buy it. And the more expensive the card, the more you should be that way. Now, I made a split-second decision the other day for a card on eBay, but it wasn't a super expensive card. It was just like, I think that I want that, and then I bought it, and I'm like, did I really want that? and so I think that the more expensive the price point, the more you should probably mull it over and make sure it's right. That said, if you get to a big show like Strongsville or the National or, the Dallas Card Show or the Chantilly or whatever it is, and you get to the show and you do find the right card, if you mull it over, there's a very good chance it won't be there when you come back. So, it's one of the reasons I probably buy most of the stuff that I buy online through auctions is because you have time to think on it. Nobody's going to go in there and buy it from under you. We all know when the auction ends. It gives you time to process it, look at it again, get other people's opinions. It's one of the reasons I think it's a popular buying format is because you get time to think. But there are times when you're at a show and you're like, if I don't buy this right now, this is going to be gone. And then you just go, I better buy it so it's not gone. And then you buy it and you're like, why did I buy it? I think that that's one of the things that buying graded cards is why there's a benefit is number one, it's less likely you're going to miss something. Like, I think everybody has bought a card at one point. I know I have. And then you get it home, you're like, oh man, I didn't notice that wrinkle on the card. That's why it was a good deal. But if you have a card that's been graded and it's in a 6, according to PSA standards, they're not going to have any wrinkles in them. So you don't have to worry about missing the wrinkle because it's been graded in a grade that is above where a wrinkle is acceptable. So I don't think I have a great answer for you other than that's one of the reasons I think I lean towards buying at auctions. It's another reason why I'm very conservative when I purchase. I have to make sure that it's right. And at the end of the day, I've said this before, a card is a stored value asset. There is value in the card that is not going to suddenly go away. So have I bought cards and made a mistake? Yeah. I just talked the other day with my buddy Darren on our collaboration video, which is posted on his channel. If you haven't subscribed to Return to Collecting, subscribe to Return to Collecting. And he had a video that posted just yesterday on and we have this big discussion. One of the things I say is, yeah, I bought this Don Drysdale rookie card. I got it, decided I didn't like it, so I sold it. Now, if you buy a card at a good deal, you can usually get most of, if not all of your money back. And if you buy a card and you go, I don't like this at all, okay, maybe you lose 10%. It's not the end of the world, you know? So it's not like you're buying something that is worthless to everybody else, you know? So the risk, there is some risk, but it's not a crazy amount of risk, because unless you're buying a modern card and the player tears his ACL the next day, if you're buying a Jackie Robinson card or a Hank Aaron or a Willie Mays, you're going to be able to get most of your money back unless you just way overpaid for the card. So I tend to be conservative, and I tend to buy online, and that's a couple of the reasons why. I've got a question for you. Not making this political, but do you or have you ever collected any political cards and or autographs? In my opinion, political cards and autos are a come-up and could be a better investment than sports cards, because everyone, regardless if they love them or hate them, knows who the politicians are, and they will always have a rabid fan base. But then again, this isn't about me, but rather your opinion. Thanks again, and I look forward to your response. You know, you're talking to a guy who loves non-sport cards too. And, you know, I mean, I collect pirate cards, for goodness sakes. So I definitely am interested in collecting political cards. Have I bought political cards? Yes. Did I buy them because I want to be political? No. I bought them because I have admiration for history, for our founding fathers. You know, I have a Ben Franklin 1952 look and see. You know, I have a Paul Revere 1952 Topps look and see. I've got a George Washington. I've got Thomas Jefferson. I've got a lot of the cards from that set. And at that time, some of the most famous people were not just, you know, athletes, but they were politicians. They were inventors. They were historical cards. It was a historical set. And, you know, there's a Queen Elizabeth card in that set. It's a really cool set, the 52 Topps look and see. And so I do collect a lot of those cards. I have bid on many cards that I didn't win that were pre-war, I guess you'd call them political people, but government officials, presidents, inventors, things like that, that many of which I've not won, but I've bid on. And so I like that kind of stuff. And again, it's not about being political or not political. It's about a reverence for history. And it's one of the things, like I mentioned earlier in one of the questions, the first question was, I like learning about history and history of the world. I like learning about the history of different sports. I like learning about prominent people in our country's history and in world history. And one medium that you can collect about some of those people is autographs, but also cards. There are cards on just about anybody you can think of. You know, that 52 look and see set has a Gandhi card. I mean, it has anything you can think. I have a Winston Churchill card from that set. Now, do I think that they're a good investment? I don't know about that. I mean, maybe, possibly. I don't buy things because I think they're a good investment. I buy things that I like, and I do consider, is this something that has upside? Because if it has more downside than upside, then I would usually wait to buy it. So do I think Abraham Lincoln stuff will go up in value over time? Yeah. Do I think Martin Luther King stuff will go up in value over time? Yeah. Do I think that they're a good investment? I don't know if you'd call it that, but I think that they will have demand for many years to come. And so I think there's a very good possibility that the values of those could increase. again, it goes back to buy what you like. I mean, I know that's so cliche to say, but it is true. You know, if you are a fan of your U.S. history classes growing up, and you have U.S. historical figures that you admire, and you want to collect pieces of memorabilia and cards and autographs from those people, then I think that that's what you should collect. Because what you shouldn't do is you shouldn't collect pre-war baseball cards of guys that you don't like just because some other guy thinks that they're a good investment. I don't think that that's the move. Like, that's not the move. That's not the move. The move is, this is a hobby, and the hobby is supposed to be fun. And the part that makes it fun is, you know, accumulating things that you enjoy looking at and you enjoy hunting for and you enjoy showing and having as part of your collection. So if instead of collecting, you know, vintage football, you like collecting, you know, autographs of early U.S. presidents, I think that that's totally, I think that's great. I wouldn't blame you at all. And I would be interested in collecting some of that myself if I had more money. But I just have so much money to go around, so you have to make some decisions at some point. So I think that's my take. I think I answered the question. Now, again, as always, guys, don't hesitate to ask your question. Had 5 this week. You just heard all 5. If I get 3 this week, I'll only answer 3. I look forward to hearing the questions that you have. And, you know, I look forward to sharing my thoughts on the topic and discussing the topic that you're interested in. Certainly not giving an answer, because it's not an answer. It's just one guy's thoughts on the topic that you're asking about.